Look at a massive steel grain bin in winter, and it seems completely dormant. It sits perfectly still in the snow, like a frozen monument. Inside that steel shell, the harvest remains biologically active. The bin holds a massive, tightly packed colony of living organisms. Even after being harvested, those individual seeds continue to breathe. They continuously respire, taking in oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide, water vapor, and metabolic heat. Because bulk grain is highly self-insulating, all that metabolic heat has nowhere to go. It stays trapped deep inside the core of the bin, holding on to the initial heat of the summer harvest for months into the freezing winter. Sealing millions of respiring, heat-generating seeds into a freezing steel container doesn't preserve them. It creates a biological time bomb. As the outdoor temperature drops, a severe temperature differential forms. The steel walls of the bin become freezing cold, while the insulated core of the grain mass remains warm. This diagram shows the normal pattern for moisture migration during fall and winter. As the air near the freezing bin walls cools, it becomes heavier and sinks to the floor, pushing inward toward the warm center to create a continuous convection current. As that air moves into the core and rises, it heats up. Warmer air has a higher capacity to hold moisture, so it absorbs water vapor directly from the respiring grain as it travels upward. Eventually, this upward draft of warm, wet air hits the cold layer of grain right at the top of the bin. The temperature drops rapidly, and all that trapped moisture condenses instantly. This creates a concentrated zone of wet grain. The seeds begin to crust together, creating an ideal breeding ground for rapid mold growth and explosive insect infestations. Left alone, the basic laws of thermodynamics guarantee the harvest will rot from the inside out. To counter this, farmers use a mechanical intervention called a grain aeration system. Aeration is often confused with grain drying, but they serve different purposes. Drying requires high heat and massive airflow to pull water out of wet grain. Aeration uses ambient outdoor air, pushed at very low volumes, strictly to regulate temperature. The process begins with large external fans mounted at the base of the bin. These fans generate static pressure, forcing outside air into a space called the plenum, an open chamber directly underneath the bin's floor. That pressurized air is forced up through a perforated metal floor. It squeezes through millions of intergranular voids, which are the microscopic gaps between individual packed seeds. This mechanical setup acts like a set of artificial lungs for the bin, actively overpowering those destructive natural convection currents to dictate the internal microclimate. When air is forced up through the grain, it establishes a curved tempering zone, traveling vertically. During an aeration cycle, the bin is divided into 3 phases: properly conditioned grain below, the actively changing zone, and untouched grain ahead. As air pushes upward, it separates into 2 distinct waves. The temperature front travels 50 times faster than the moisture front. Because of this massive speed differential, the air cools the grain rapidly, moving past before it can deposit new moisture. The warm, stale air that gets pushed ahead of the cooling front is then safely expelled out through open exhaust vents on the bin's roof. By exploiting this thermodynamic loophole, farmers can run their fans during humid weather, using the cool outside air to bring the harvest down to a safe temperature without accidentally rotting it. But running these fans requires exact timing. If an operator turns the system off before the cooling front reaches the roof, they leave a layer of warm grain sitting at the top. When cold winter air hits that warm layer, moisture condenses immediately and spoilage begins. On the other hand, running the fans for too long, or operating them during exceptionally dry weather, pulls the natural moisture out of the grain. Grain is sold by weight. If it gets overdried, the physical harvest shrinks. A farmer can literally evaporate thousands of dollars in potential revenue straight into the atmosphere. Managing an aeration system is a high-stakes financial balancing act, where every single hour of fan runtime directly impacts the final paycheck. This power graph reveals how operators mitigate risk using precision algorithms. These jagged peaks represent exact moments the system turned fans on and off. Combining this with the top graph, controllers integrate internal temperatures with real-time weather, activating fans only during perfect ambient windows. This constant loop of data feedback engineers a perfectly stable microclimate for the grain, requiring almost no manual intervention from the farmer. The modern grain bin operates as a highly engineered active thermodynamic facility, a system that precisely manages biological respiration to safeguard the global food supply.